thing on the
I don't think it's only celebrities going to be shook. He had politicians.
Diddy's being exposed daily. Lawsuits, leaked videos, secret deals. But hip-hop's royal couple, silent. No tweet, no comment, nothing. Jay-Z and Diddy go way back. Private parties, shared lawyers, even rumored NDA networks. And Beyoncé? She hasn't been this quiet since the Solange elevator moment. Insiders say silence isn't random, it's strategy. Because if Diddy talks, he's not going down alone. Are they hiding something?
There's a lot of negative stuff around Jay-Z right now, which is clearly damaging to him.
Yeah, and I think there's like a famous quote from someone who was acquitted, and he said, all right, where do I go to get my reputation back?
Right.
I mean, social media was a light. Beyonce's next, Jay-Z's next, all the people in the inner circle is next.
Yeah, and the problem is there are just so many pictures of the two of them partying together, and he clearly was at a load of Diddy parties.
May 19th, 2026, and something happened that the most talked about power couple in music never wanted under a microscope. For months, people have been asking one question over and over again. Why has Beyoncé said almost nothing about Diddy? Why has Jay-Z, a man whose image has always been built on control, confidence, and absolute command, remained so measured whenever this story surfaces? To a lot of people, that silence has not felt normal. It has felt deliberate. It has felt strategic. It has felt like the kind of silence that creates even more questions than any statement ever could. And that is where this story becomes so compelling, because maybe this was never silence in the ordinary sense. Maybe this was something else entirely. Maybe while the public waited for a post, an interview, a red carpet answer, or even one carefully worded public sentence, another kind of response was already happening behind closed doors. Through lawyers, through reputation management, through pressure, and through the machinery that protects celebrity power at the highest level. And today, we are going to walk through every layer of that.
Jay-Z has been notable by his silence since these charges were brought against Diddy. Why do you think that is?
Because that's what he does. He starts little fires everywhere, forces everyone involved to go and carry water while he sneaks away without a response. That changes now, Sean. Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, Robert Kelly, Sean Combs have one person in common, professionally and privately: Sean Carter. This has been a fist of tyranny that has been punching through our culture and our society for decades. It must stop.
Before we go any further, make sure you hit subscribe right now. This channel covers the stories mainstream entertainment coverage often tiptoes around, the stories that get watered down, cleaned up, and carefully repackaged before they ever reach the public. If you want updates when the next chapter breaks, subscribe, hit the bell, and like this video so more people see it. Now let's get back to it. To understand why this silence matters so much, you have to go back decades, not just to 2024 when Diddy's legal problems exploded into full public view, not just to the federal raids, not just to the arrest. You have to go back to the late 1990s when two men were rising in hip-hop, not just as artists, but as architects of wealth, influence, and cultural power. On one side, you had Sean Combs, then one of the biggest moguls in music, the face of Bad Boy Records, the symbol of excess, ambition, and unstoppable momentum. On the other, Jay-Z was building his own empire with ruthless precision, turning rap success into something much larger: business leverage, executive access, and generational wealth. For years, these were not casual associates in the eyes of the public. They moved in the same elite spaces, appeared at the same events, shared the same circles, and became symbols of Black excellence and Black business dominance in entertainment. They represented a level of access most people could not imagine. They stood at the top of rooms everyone else wanted to enter. That history matters because when a public scandal hits someone on the outer edge of your network, silence can mean very little. But when a scandal hits someone widely seen as part of your world for decades, silence takes on a completely different meaning. People start reading into it. People start asking whether the silence comes from shock, legal caution, private knowledge, or simple self-protection.
That is when people began looking more closely at everyone who had long been associated with Diddy. Friends, collaborators, celebrities photographed beside him, executives linked by business, and especially the people considered closest to him within the upper tier of the industry. That is where Beyoncé and Jay-Z became unavoidable subjects of public conversation. Not because they were charged alongside him, not because they were formally tied to every allegation circulating online, but because they were too important, too visible, and too historically linked to Diddy for the public not to ask where they stood. And yet, there was no emotional public separation, no clear moral statement, no moment of outrage, no strong public expression of sympathy for alleged victims attached directly to his name. That absence became a story by itself. Then the situation became even more explosive. In late 2024, Jaguar Wright appeared on Piers Morgan's show and made serious allegations involving both Jay-Z and Beyoncé. Those claims were highly controversial, highly inflammatory, and immediately drew major attention online. What happened next is one of the main reasons people stopped describing the Carter response as silence. Because Piers Morgan later addressed the segment publicly, said lawyers for Jay-Z and Beyoncé had contacted the show and confirmed that the interview had been edited after those objections were raised, that alone sent a shockwave through the media ecosystem. Think about what the public saw in that moment. Not an Instagram statement, not a press conference, not a tearful interview. Instead, they saw a powerful legal response move with remarkable speed. To many viewers, it looked like a demonstration of reach, the kind of reach that can force major platforms to change course almost immediately. That moment was interpreted in very different ways depending on who you asked. Supporters of the Carters saw it as exactly what should happen when false and damaging claims are made publicly without proof. From that perspective, legal intervention was not suspicious at all. It was responsible, predictable, and necessary. Critics saw the same event very differently. To them, it looked like proof that this was not a couple simply choosing dignity and distance. It looked like a couple willing to say nothing publicly while responding with force privately whenever their names got too close to the fire. That distinction matters, because it is one thing to stay silent. It is another thing to remain publicly above the chaos while deploying legal power in the background. And if you have watched the Carter playbook for years, that pattern does not feel new. People often point back to the 2014 elevator incident involving Solange and Jay-Z. When that footage surfaced, the internet exploded with theories. The speculation was relentless. What did the public get from the Carters? Very little. They stayed quiet, waited for the frenzy to peak, and then released a tightly controlled statement that revealed almost nothing while restoring just enough order to move on. That is why some observers say what we are seeing now is not unusual. In their view, the strategy has always been the same. Do not react emotionally in public, do not give more oxygen than necessary, and let legal language do what personal language would only complicate. But this story is bigger than a PR strategy. Because throughout the entire period in which Diddy's legal jeopardy became one of the biggest stories in entertainment, a central question never went away. Why was there never a clean moral break? Other celebrities with far less obvious connection to him found ways to express shock, disgust, or sadness about the allegations and the broader revelations emerging around the case. Many were careful with their wording, but they still gave the public something. Some condemned abuse generally, some expressed support for victims, some distanced themselves from the culture around him. The Carters, by contrast, stayed exceptionally narrow. Their public intervention appeared when claims touched them directly. That was enough for critics to argue that the silence was not about grief, confusion, or discretion. It was about legal containment.
And from a crisis management point of view, that interpretation is not hard to understand. Any lawyer handling a high-profile situation like this would likely warn against broad emotional statements, especially if there is any chance that old photographs, old partnerships, old communications, or old appearances at the same events could be dragged back into public conversation. The more you say, the more you can be pinned against later. The more you moralize, the more people ask what you knew and when you knew it. So from a legal standpoint, silence can be a strategy, a very smart one. But from a public standpoint, silence has a cost. Because the internet does not interpret silence like a lawyer does. The public interprets silence emotionally, symbolically, dramatically. People assume that what is not being said may matter more than what is. Then came another turning point. In December 2024, a civil complaint was filed naming Jay-Z alongside Diddy in a sexual assault allegation tied to an event from years earlier. Jay-Z responded forcefully, publicly rejecting the claim and criticizing the attorney behind it. For many people, that was notable not only because of the allegation itself, but because it was one of the rare times he responded with visible emotion instead of total distance. Then, in February 2025, that lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning it could not be filed again in the same form. Legally, that was a major victory for Jay-Z. His team treated it as complete vindication. Supporters said that should have ended the matter immediately. But by then, public attention had already shifted to something broader than one case. Because once a name enters this kind of scandal ecosystem, even temporarily, the legal outcome and the public memory do not always move together. One can close while the other keeps expanding. Headlines linger, screenshots linger, associations linger. And then, in 2025, another civil filing briefly drew headlines because Beyoncé and Jay-Z were mentioned as alleged witnesses in connection with a separate event before. Later amendments removed their names. Even though they were not defendants in that matter, the damage in public conversation was obvious. For days, the headline existed. And in the age of algorithmic attention, sometimes the existence of the headline is enough. That is the real problem with public suspicion once it reaches a certain temperature. Legal removal does not instantly erase perception. Now we arrive at the shadow side of the story, the part fueled less by confirmed facts and more by fear of what documentation, testimony, and trial developments might eventually reveal. When federal cases expand, people start thinking in networks. They think about contacts, guest lists, financial records, NDAs, travel patterns, event attendance, and business overlap. They ask not only who did what, but who was present, who benefited, who stayed quiet, and who had enough proximity that future disclosures might become dangerous. That is why so many commentators began talking about paper trails rather than sensational tapes. In the public imagination, the threat is not just scandalous footage, it is records, signatures, emails, deals, photos, logs, contracts, ownership structures, the dull paperwork of power, the kind that can tell a more lasting story than any rumor ever could. To be clear, much of what circulates online about these supposed records remains speculative, but speculation thrives where trust has already been damaged, and once people believe there may be hidden documentation tying elite figures together in ways the public never understood, every silence starts to feel heavier. There is also another reason the Carters remain under such scrutiny: symbolism. Beyoncé and Jay-Z are not just celebrities. They have been presented for years as the ultimate image of control, discipline, and empire building. They are not supposed to look rattled. They are not supposed to look exposed. They are not supposed to look like the kind of people history can suddenly corner. That is why this story has hit such a nerve. Because Diddy's fall, whether viewed through criminal proceedings, civil allegations, or public disgrace, shattered the illusion that extreme fame and extreme money always remain above consequence. Once one titan falls, the public naturally turns and looks at the others. That is the devastating irony. For years, the mythology around top-tier celebrity power suggested there was a level where accountability became negotiable, where image could absorb almost anything, where wealth, access, and influence could outlast scandal. But if one of the biggest figures in entertainment can face that kind of reckoning, then nobody standing near that world looks quite as untouchable as before. And that brings us to one of the strangest side characters in the whole saga, 50 Cent. Throughout this entire period, 50 Cent has publicly mocked, criticized, and commented on Diddy and the people around him in a way that has drawn enormous attention. Yet the contrast has fascinated observers. When a broadcaster platformed direct allegations and got hit with a fast legal response, that was one thing, but 50 Cent's running commentary has often remained just that, commentary. Why the difference? People have theories. Some believe it is because going after a provocateur like 50 Cent would only magnify whatever he is saying and keep the story alive longer. Others think it may simply be a strategic choice. Challenge formal media platforms when necessary, but do not escalate every taunt from someone who thrives on public conflict. Whatever the explanation, the contrast has added yet another layer to the public's reading of the Carter's strategy. And then the trial began. As courtroom proceedings involving Diddy moved forward, the atmosphere changed again. Trials are different from headlines, different from rumors, different from podcast monologues and social media chaos. Trials create records, testimony, exhibits, timelines, cross-examinations, permanent documentation. And that is why so many people across the industry have been watching so closely, because a trial can be narrow, but it can also open doors. It can surface details nobody expected to become public. It can change what people thought they knew. It can leave some names untouched and draw others unexpectedly into the light. Even when a person is not charged, not subpoenaed, and not directly implicated in open court, the ongoing production of evidence can still reshape how the wider public interprets a whole era. That is the larger story now. Not just Diddy as an individual, not just one defendant or one celebrity couple, but a whole system of fame, access, silence, and managed perception. A system in which some people allegedly suffered while others, whether knowingly or unknowingly, occupied the glamorous outer rings of that same universe. And the public is no longer satisfied with glossy mythology. People want to know how the machine worked, who protected whom, who said nothing, who acted only when their own image was threatened, who moved privately while staying publicly serene. That is why Beyoncé's silence has become such a loaded symbol. Not because silence proves guilt, it does not. Not because silence proves innocence, it does not do that either. But because in a moment this large, silence itself becomes part of the narrative. It becomes a statement even when no statement is made. And maybe that is the deepest truth at the center of this story. Not that we already know everything, we do not. Not that every suspicion online is valid, it is not. But that power has its own language, and one of its most refined dialects is controlled silence. Silence can preserve options. Silence can avoid contradiction. Silence can keep lawyers comfortable. Silence can deny the public a quote, deny the media a clip, and deny history an easy confession. But silence cannot fully control interpretation. That is why this story still feels unfinished. The empire still stands. The image is still polished. The red carpets still happen. The awards still get handed out. The music still moves. The brands still glow. Yet something underneath has shifted. Public confidence in the untouchable aura of entertainment royalty has been cracked. Maybe not destroyed, but cracked. And once that happens, every future appearance gets read differently. Every pause feels intentional. Every legal response feels revealing. Every public non-response becomes part of the archive. So no, the silence around this story has never felt empty. To millions of people watching from the outside, it has felt active, disciplined, strategic, protective, maybe even essential. Because in a world where every careless sentence can become evidence, where every old photograph can return with new meaning, and where every powerful association can suddenly look dangerous under courtroom light, the first person to speak is not always the person who wins. The person who controls the narrative often wins. The person who can keep emotion out of public view often wins. And the person who can make entire segments disappear without ever stepping in front of a camera has not lost control completely. Not yet. But the story is still moving. The record is still being built. Witnesses speak. Documents surface. Proceedings continue. Public memory stretches farther than any PR team would like. And somewhere between the sealed filings, the edited interviews, the dismissed suits, the old friendships, the strategic legal walls, and the carefully maintained image of the most famous couple in music, the rest of the story may still be waiting to surface.
Jay-Z has been notable by his silence since these charges were brought against Diddy. Why do you think that is?
Because that's what he does. He starts little fires everywhere, forces everyone involved to go and carry water while he sneaks away without a response. That changes now.